Hello there, so you wanna make a Chrome extension? Well, so did I. That's why I made a ton of them. And now I'm gonna show you the best and easiest way to do so. Because the OG way kinda sucks. And if you made a website before or an extension, there's a good chance you can follow along. But before we get started, and this is what I would highly recommend, that if you're making an extension, especially for the public, you want to think about, your competition. Do some market research. Because the bad news would be that most extensions really don't make money. Some are swimming in it. But the good news would be that it is not that difficult to get organic users. The market is kind of underserved. It wouldn't be even a rarity to see that there's demand and no one is meeting it. And partly because of the switch to manifest free, some older extensions kind of went away. Now, generally speaking, that wouldn't matter that much, but usually it's kind of difficult to dislodge the long-established players, and recently many of them just got kicked to the curb. Also, AI can be a big help to make extensions. Certainly could be true for many cases, but extension development is, generally speaking, is within the range of competency of AI. But let's just get started, and we'll be using WXT here, because it's the best, along with React, which is just popular. So we need to open the console, and we are just typing it in and then getting started here, and we'll be naming the project SamAI. And instead of having one or many small projects that don't really teach you that much other than the first or second step, we'll be actually building a real project that will ship to. So I'm calling it SamAI. So this is kind of like a AI assistant that you might see in the browsers, but ours will be special. And this is an idea I had, that there are free AIs out there that we can use. So instead of those who ask for like 20 or 40 bucks per month even, I'll be having mine for free. We'll be using free AIs. And this could also be a, great way to showcase AI, and also possibly we can add something paid later. Wouldn't necessarily be my style necessarily, or possibly add promotions or whatever. The point is, making software is not nearly as difficult as getting eyeballs. And I suspect free might get eyeballs. So let's just go with that, and we'll be using React, and we'll be using Bun here. It's fast. So let's go with that. So apparently everything is order, yeah. And we can just open our favorite code editor. So we are in, and we can just run the dev server with bun dev. And we got it. So this is the starting point we have, and the pop-up is WXT with React. And I would also highly recommend that you have some kind of AI helper on the side. There are many tutorials out there and guidance out there where you might see the guy just typing everything in one by one, especially from top to bottom. And unfortunately, that just means that they kind of suck. They just have the code pre-written on their other monitor and they're just copying it in. Or perhaps, at best, they are really good at coding, but you gotta use the tools that you have available. So for example, we can update the pop-up, but before we do so, we're gonna add Tailwind, which is a kind of a simpler way to deal with CSS. So we can just tell AI to add Tailwind to our project. I'm using Claude 3.5 for this, which is one of the smartest AIs available at this point. So we can just run commands. And install packages. If I wasn't been doing this, then I would have to just search for it online. Or possibly, if I'm that used to typing this in, then I guess from memory as well. But generally speaking, you would just look into the docs. But this should be fine. And AI is also updating our pop-up that we will talk about later to use Tailwind styles. One aspect that I don't like about the changes of AI, we'll fix later. I actually need to make a few fixes. So you can just look into the docs. And this is a good example that, albeit this was the first time we used AI for help, it kind of failed. And we needed to use the docs here for Tailwind 4. Of course, in this case, we used Bonnet instead of npm install. So I had to fix post CSS and the Tailwind config. But that is not all, because AI also recommended that we put the style CSS in the pop-up, which is okay for now, but it makes a lot more sense to put it outside the pop-up in the endpoints, so we can later reuse with all our routes. Because the pop-up and the app TSX is the page that we see when we open up the extension. On the extension bar, yeah, I just told AI to restyle it. Not many other information available, but let's just see what it gave me. Other small tweak that with Tailwind 4, we just need to import Tailwind like this into the style CSS that we'll just reuse across the project. We can even throw it in root, but it's fine now. And this is the styled WXT React page. Obviously, we will not be using this, just edit as a test. So we already know about the pop-up here. So this is our pop-up page made by AI. Index is just totally default, and we need WXT. We want to change the title here, because this will be later used as the title of the pop-up, obviously. And in the main TSX, we don't need to change anything else. So effectively, only the app TSX matters. Now, the files that we want to pay attention to, so null modules doesn't really matter. Public, this is where we put our icons later, but it's not really relevant. And in the WXT config, we'll need to update this, the manifest, based on what kind of features we want to have access to. And of course, when we want to push up the extension, then we need to provide some defaults. This should be a good start, right? So name, description, you want to change this later, but for now, we're just using the name here. And you can only ask, well, you can ask for all the permissions, but Google will refuse your extension if you're asking for permissions that you are not using. Also, while we're at it, this will be a good time to start some version control. Let's just go within it. This is gonna be our first version. Yeah, let's go with the private repo. Let's go. If you're not familiar with version control, it's a bit like making saves in a game, and you definitely want to be making saves. Now, content. This is what runs on websites. So, a super simple way to show it, that over here, we have nothing open. So if we inspect, we'll also see nothing in the console. But if we go to Wikipedia, then we see hello content. I'm just gonna refresh so you can see hello content. So our script ran on this site. And background would be kind of the background of our extension. You can think of it like front end and back end. So we can just click on our extension and we're gonna inspect that. Inspect the pop-up, and we see hello background. So this does not run on the website. And we will need to use messages to communicate between the two. And albeit a little bit we're getting ahead of ourselves, we can also build, if I actually type the right command, and in the output, we can see this Chrome manifest version 3. So this is our extension. We can actually add it to our browser, to our Chrome browser, and it will work. So this is my main browser, and this is the output, and we can just drag it in. And SamAI free AI assistant, we have it, and we should be able to also select it. Of course, currently we don't have much, but we can see that the pop-up is at least working and customized. And this is what you would literally use to release on the Chrome store as well. You just need to package it, zip it, and then you can just release it. Ideally, you would rename it. But let's just get to work. So, in the same vein, if we want other pages, then we can actually just... So, for example, we can have an API key page here. If we want to use an API key for the user, because that kind of allows us to have this free service that they can just use their own free key. But we have a problem that we don't have any place to really store it. And when it comes to storage, you have a few options, but the main one that's really appealing for us is sync storage. So in the utils, we make a store, and it's just gonna have an API key, I guess, an API key store. And generally speaking, it's a better idea to make additional stores instead of updating stores. Of course, depends on the use case, but generally speaking, dealing with one mega store is gonna be less efficient and more annoying because you need to update it all the time. So now that we have the store, AI might be able to update our page. AI did make 2 mistakes. It was not using the correct method, but it's fine. I can just write dot, and set value is the correct one here. And this is important to mention that syntax does not matter that much. So I a little bit went over the store implementation quickly, but it does not matter because usually you would be looking up the docs, and if something doesn't work, you might be asking AI, looking into the docs, especially because you need to do so many things that syntax pretty much doesn't matter. Sure, you're gonna learn some syntax, but syntax is not what matters, problem solving does. So my point is that if you're asking AI almost every time or looking up the docs, you're doing it right. Because even if you memorize things, things change. Even in this project, Tailwind 4 came out, and the old way of installing Tailwind was not good anymore. In fact, it was a hindrance, because like, oh yeah, it should work like that, but it does not. So my point is it's 95% problem solving and like 5% just remembering the right things. Okay, apparently our API key page is working, but we're not linking to it from the pop-up. So I'm making the component empty, and this is an important step. And this is why you should check AI every time, because if you accept what AI wrote you, then it will use it in the future as a reference. Meaning, you will only get more lost. Okay? AI did not know to link to the URL page, so I had to fix that. API key.html. That is the correct route. And it does work. So this is how it looks like now. Configure API key. And we go to the API key configuration page. It probably works through. Save API key. And in this case, we can actually very easily see that it does, because if we re-navigate to the same page, then we display the API key. So our storage is working, and this is a sync storage, meaning it's a little bit like a server, but it can only store 100 kilobytes, which is totally fine if you're only storing text, for example. I also decided to update the icons, which is something that's gonna feel nicer as we are going forward. And generally this is a good approach. If you're gonna do something later, for sure, then it would be a good idea to do it right now. You don't want something at the back of your mind, because that is just going to slow you down. So either you want to just write it down, or just do it ASAP. So in this case, I was thinking, oh my god, we gotta change the icon, we gotta change the icon. And I'm not thinking that anymore. Anyway, let's add the AI. And the code is not the most important part here, but the logic. We're using Gemini 2 Flash because it allows you 15 free API calls per minute. And this is merely how we have to implement it. And of course, from the API key store, we are getting the API key. It's a little clunky now, but maybe we want to add a different key in the future. And of course, based on the prompt, we'll be generating a response, and we are getting the relevant part of it, and then returning it. And by the way, I do recommend that you have a little bit of a Kanban board on the side, so you can see what needs to be done and what you're planning to do and what you're currently doing. Because again, keeping things in your head, no good. So what is the next step? And feel free to use AI wherever you like. Because I did use AI a little bit to get some guidance here. So in the WXT config, we need to enable context menus. And we also need to have a context menus create. So essentially we're adding a button, but most of all, we're kind of listening for it on the back end. So this is how it looks right now. We're trying to open Wikipedia, but if we right click, then we see Sam. It currently does nothing, but does it? Because we open this, and if you just try to listen here, then we will not see anything other than the hello content, right. But if you try to listen here, we might see something else. So I'm just going to delete it. We see that, yeah. Again, we click here. Oh, it went away. Inspect pop-up. And we see that SamAI context menu clicked. So the next step is that we make a context pop-up page that we obviously want to reuse with SamAI when we click on it. So on the background, we are listening for the click. And when we click, then we open up the context pop-up HTML with a certain width and height. And this does work. It's called SamAI now. Something to keep in mind, that AI likes to possibly make other changes that you don't approve of. So I'm just going to call it Sam. I think it's going to be more personal. Also, I was thinking of the story, Lord of the Rings, like Frodo and Sam. Maybe someone's going to get that angle. By the way, albeit I was not committing, you were not seeing me commit, but I actually wrote an auto committer that was committing instead of me. So automatically writes commit messages based on the changes and commits after some inactivity, just showing that we are saving progress. So next step, and it's a bit of a big one, but it's pretty much as simple as possible for what I'm trying to show. But let's just try to go logically. So we have a pop-up, it opens up, and we want to type our message. But we have problems here. First of all, we don't have an address bar. So there's no way to get the information from params. So we would need to have a different strategy. I think in this case, the best strategy is local storage. So that is what we will be using. But we have another problem. And this is probably something you don't know about, is that currently we are using active tab. And unfortunately, that won't be enough. Because if you use active tab, and I was kind of hoping we can go farther with active tab, but unfortunately it does not work for a use case, because when we fill out the information, our active tab is the pop-up. So unless we abruptly close the pop-up, possibly, and hoping that the active tab is going to be the one before, it's just not going to work. So essentially we need to keep track of tabs. So we need another permission. But let's just go step by step. So everything starts on the background. If we have no tab ID, then nothing happens. Otherwise, we send a get input info message to the front, the content TS. And it's important to keep in mind that how Chrome extensions kind of work is that you always need the background TS to act as a kind of proxy between pages. This is for security reasons. And if you try to message directly, it will just not work. So we send the get input info message to the front, and we try to get information, assuming we are clicking on an input element, which could be a text field or just an input, and we are sending that back. We don't have to care about the other one right now. And we are storing this information in the local storage. We might update what we are storing later, but that's not the most important part right now. And of course, if we are clicking on something else, then we might clear the local storage from the input info. We might go with a different approach later, but for now, this serves our purposes. And keep in mind that the information needs to persist, at least to the point where we update the front end with the information that we are getting from the AI response, I suppose. And of course, then we create the pop-up. But of course, the pop-up cannot just directly receive this information. We cannot just pass it as params. So if you kind of think about it as web pages, that might not be the best way to conceptualize it. Anyway, on the pop-up page, it's pretty bare bones. We basically have an input field that is empty, and we can just typing something and just click send. So that's not the hard part here, but we are kind of loading the information. Yeah, on load. So use effect with an empty array is something that runs once when the component loads, or in this case, kind of page. And we are getting the input info from the local storage, which will not be the case. We might expand this later. But of course, in this case, we are just using it for the prompting aspect. And for that, we will need to, well, assuming that we want to fill out a field, then we need to have a field for it. And then we have the handle submit. So if we click the button, and first of all, kind of checking if we have at least 3 characters, and we generate an input from Gemini that we do need to await, and you do need to add your API key for this to work. And if you spam it too much and you're still using the free version, it will also not work. You might get timed out, but also you can use it like 15 times per minute. So for reasonable use, it should be totally fine. But the important point that after we have this response, assuming we don't have it, then I guess we end there. But then we send input value message to the backend, and the backend listens for this send input value message. And assuming we still have the source tab ID, which we should because we're storing it, then we send the source tab ID and the message to the front. The front is actually also listening for this set input value. So we always need the background TS as kind of a middleman. And in this case, we just update the field, the input, with the response that we receive from Gemini. And I must emphasize that you do need tabs here in this case, because suppose you are kind of hoping you use active tab. So let's just say that you send a message and boom, update active tab. But in this case, this is the active tab. So it will not work. So let's just see if it works. Okay, so say hi. Boom. Hi there, how can I help you today? I know, things are getting together. Later, we might want to expand on or refine our implementation, but it's a pretty good solution right now. Okay, next feature. So, if we navigate to google.com, so essentially we search on Google, then we also want to search with Gemini on the side. So just get some extra information, I suppose. Yet because it would make our content a little bit too bloated, I'm choosing to put it into a source content folder that we are just later using. And the logic is simple. We simply get the query from the URL search params, of course, from Google.com page. Then we prompt the backend with an appropriate message along with the prompt. So we can generate the Gemini response, and we send it back. And when we receive it, if we don't receive it, then we prompt again. But if we do receive it, then we show the side panel with the response that we received. We also need to listen for URL changes. Essentially, if the user searches again, we want to be handling that case. The search file mostly just deals with UI here, but we're also getting the response that we are displaying. And of course, we are dealing with the close as well. Keep in mind that the new meta, especially when it comes to styling, is prompt well, then customize. Ideally, you don't need to customize at all. But ultimately, this feature is nothing new for us. We are just getting the response and throwing it into a div. So, okay, let's go and search for the best programming languages. And we wait. SamAI results, getting AI insights. Okay, here the search results focusing on the balanced perspective, avoiding generic lists. Sure. So this is what we got. It's more like asking further information. And it's not just new searches, but give me a tasty vegan recipe. Should work too. So we wait. Getting AI insight, and we are getting something. Keep in mind that the answers are limited by the intelligence of the AI and how well I'm kind of prompting it. Yet, in this case, it's also important to consider the use case of it, because if the user wants something very detailed, then they're probably gonna use something else, right? We can even combine it with the previous feature. Sam, give me a short, interesting search prompt. Okay? Lost civilizations, evidence hidden in plain sight. Search it. Alright. SamAI, results, getting AI insights. Boom! And if you don't like it, I guess we can just close it. One cool little option we can do is have a toggle that allows us to have the search on and off. I think you would want it on, by default at least. That is my preference. And then, of course, we gotta make sure that we are getting this value from the search settings store. And if we don't have it, then we don't search. And of course, we need to set it, which we are setting on the main pop-up. The UI really doesn't matter. We're just essentially setting a value in the search settings store. So we have this search enhancement, yay! By default is on. Our pop-up doesn't have that much going on, but that would be a good thing, generally speaking, because you don't want to get lost in it. So we can configure the API key and turn on the search enhancement. And we have this purple style. You know, it's fine. I kind of like it. Oh yeah, I did that this password hider because it makes sense, because you might copy out the key and you don't see the whole key when you do. And when you copy it in, people might see your key. Now, of course, you would not be mainly concerned about people who have godlike memory, but you would be concerned about possibly camera sketching you. So basically, if people can, not even people, if cameras can see your key for even one frame, your key is no longer private. Of course, if you only use it at home, that's fine. But just keep it in mind, because you might see the tech bros sitting in the cafe, copying in their API keys. And sure, the cafe probably doesn't care, but if they did, they could pillage, and this is a little bit better. But keep in mind that all options are synced. So this essentially means that we don't have to prompt the user to log in. And that's such a great experience. All settings that they set, well, as long as they are already logged in, then they can just set whatever they can, whatever they want, and it will be persisted forever. Well. We already got more features than 99+% of the trash out there. But I still have many good ideas that we can add and that would add value. Yet I don't want it to be bloated. And you can very easily get to the point where you just keep adding features, perhaps out of good intention or whatever, but the user is intimidated and confused and they just cannot uninstall fast enough. So if you could ever choose between 10 different things, ranging from simplest to pretty complex, you want to pick the simplest and make it even simpler. Okay, so next feature. And I did make a styling improvement for the extension. So I actually generated a proper icon for it, and everything kind of follows the same style. And if you're searching for something, let's go for cute spiders. Then very much like before, it just looks better, and we're getting a response from the API. And if we right click, we see Sam, the icon I selected, logo. And now it is also styled, and input assistant is disabled by default if you're not clicking on an input, but the page assistant is the feature we are adding is very much live. So this is what you might see. Other extensions possibly have like 20 different buttons for, but in this case, we are just getting the body text and telling AI, just sending it to AI with a message. So suppose we want to summarize. That's why I opened up the train here. So we want to summarize this. Then we're sending AI the message about the train. So we actually kept the previous summary that I tried before. I'm not sure if we gotta keep this feature necessarily, but it might be useful. So the user can kind of come back to it. Essentially, this means that this doesn't necessarily have to be just a page you come to and you might have one of summaries, but you can actually chat with this. We are persisting this in the local storage because if we persist it in the sync store, then it might be too long. Although we can definitely persist in the sync, and as long as we limit it, it's probably gonna be just fine. And of course, we can ask further questions about this. What is the fastest train? Okay. Apparently, that is the one. So this is just a basic like an AI chat here. But suppose we go back to the previous page. I guess tell me the early history of trains. Oh, we have it over here. That's why I'm kind of asking for it. And then we're gonna have boom. And here we have like a summary of the early history instead of just trying to read the whole thing. Functionally, what really happens is that when we click the right mouse button, we send the message to the front to get the page content, which message we obviously have to listen for, and then we call the extract page content function, which basically are just getting the body text, but this is a slightly more reliable implementation of it. I tried to use the body hidden text before, and it was a little bit failing. At least it wasn't as consistent. And after we have this page content over here, we're just saving it into local storage. So we can look at the store. And it doesn't even need types, so you can definitely more freestyle the local storage, so you gotta be extra careful with it. But we can see that we also storing the messages here. And we have an array of messages in the local storage. And if we have more than 200 messages, then we are getting rid of the oldest one. And of course, in the context pop-up, which is what we see when we right-click with the SAM over here, we are getting the page content from the local storage and prompt Gemini, well, along with our prompt and the page content. And of course, we have to save our message and the AI's message. And once all is done, we open up chat HTML, which is a new page that we made over here. And this page predictably just loads all the messages and displays them. Of course, we add a message when we press enter or click send, and we prompt AI. The possible tricky part that we cannot really generate a Gemini message from here directly, so we have to message to the backend, which listens for it, and then we listen for the response, and then we use that, no doubt. And no doubt here, I'm focusing on the most important things, just the flow of logic here. And when it comes to CSS, and when it comes to just making some buttons, you should be heavily utilizing AI for that. Even when it comes to this project, I am using AI very liberally to kind of write the groundwork, and in places I make tweaks. And in the AI era, the difficulty is not gonna come from styling a button, but trying to keep up with AI and direct AI to do exactly what you want to do. And most importantly, fix the code that AI writes. I could have made this like a 30-hour long tutorial, typing everything in, one letter at a time, and it would have done you no favors. Yet it does bring up the question that, are we quote-unquote done with this project? And I would say that in most cases, you should be trying to release your projects as early as, well, reasonable. So in our case, we have a rather consistent styling, 2 features that seem to be working, but who knows, maybe in some cases it might be broken. Like, I just had an idea for a feature. We can use prompt styles, right? We can have a short, medium, and long prompt styles. And this means that people can pick their preference, and these are the messages we're going to be using when we are prompting Gemini. And of course, we are syncing this information for the user, so this will be persisted. And on the pop-up page, obviously, we can pick between these prompt styles. Obviously, I used AI to help build this thing out. And I'm really emphasizing that fact because you should too. So, what we have here. So, if we turn off the search enhancement, we don't have prompt styles. And if we do, then we are going with the default. This is what we had before. Short, medium, and long. So, there you go. So, if you go with the long, that should be a noticeable difference compared to what we had before. So, cute spiders. Let's go. And this is gonna be a long message, but also this is gonna take longer to appear, presumably. Much longer. Yeah, we got it. So a very long message. So that's why we chose the short one by default. So cute spiders. So this is short, but also the response should be quicker too. Yeah, boom, let's go. Because this is kind of telling that, just take your time, in-depth analysis. And this is an interesting point. Because while I could be a fan of custom settings, truly custom, that you set your prompt here, but your users generally will blame you if they fuck things up. And suppose if your prompt is bad, right? You can fix your prompt, but you cannot fix everyone else's prompt. So the point I'm making here is that it's probably better to give options than to just tell them that, yeah, you can go custom. Because that's impossible to support. And if it sucks, then they'll think you suck. Also, potentially important point that you might want to add a button to allow the users to make contact with you, just find you, or possibly support the development. Know that if they just throw some coins your way, that's kind of good too. But also if they report bugs, that could be very useful. And another feature that could be a good addition, considering that I was really thinking of it in the first place, is that a user might not want to see all the messages, right? So we can have a setting that says continue previous chat, which can be on by default, because I think it's a better experience, because you just chat with the AI and make some summaries and whatever, and if you navigate there, then you can check it out, right? It is saved. And personally, I would prefer that, but someone like, yeah, I don't care about that. And then in that case, we can have a setting at continue previous chat, which we sync. And suppose this particular user does not really care for the continue previous chat, then in that case, we will be only loading the last 2 messages, which is particular to how we are storing the messages here, because we add 2 messages before we navigate to the chat page. So if we go with an empty array here, which was the default thing that AI actually did, so AI can be a bit of a derp, but in this case, we need the last 2 messages. Otherwise, we're just loading everything. Although, it's not going to be endlessly everything, because even in that case, we have a limitation of no more than 200 messages. which you can absolutely try to sync, but you gotta keep in mind that sync is more limited, and we might be able to get away with some, but not that much. So personally, I like to use it just for settings, and we can just use local storage otherwise in this case. But of course, that will not be persisted if the user wants to have access to that in a different system on different computer. So simply how it looks is that we have a system setting here, continue previous chat, toggle, and we can look at the SamAI. So let's go. We can go summarize. Boom. So we got 6 messages here. Fair enough. But if we toggle that off, then by default, we should be having the last 2 messages, which will be generated here. So that will be just the starting message, right? And everything else is essentially scrapped. So basically we are starting fresh every time. One improvement I can think of is that some kind of a styling improvement here. And you gotta keep in mind that if the user has a pretty wide screen, then they would have had a bad experience here. So most these days are kind of limited to like 1024 pixel and 1200 pixel within those. So yeah, tell me about spiders. Okay, AI is thinking. Was that a tricky question? Oh my god. All right. So it was giving me a detailed answer. But actually, we had one problem, is that we are getting a markdown, and I added a markdown renderer over here. So for example, if you don't know markdown, this is how markdown looks. Well, we don't have a readme here. We can write the readme. So basically it has a different styling, and that's why we need to add a markdown renderer here, so we can use the information that we're getting from AI. So we're not only seeing stars, but we actually see a proper list here, and it's properly styled. And we are truly at the finish line now. One thing we are doing and adding is that we kind of need, considering that if we use longer responses, then we need to handle the markdown better. Because previously what we had is we had a short version, and we're like, let's say that we searched on for cute cats or something. And in this case, we had a very short reply, and it was fine. But when it came to longer replies, it kind of became obvious that our way of handling the markdown and the responses was not the most ideal. So suppose we search for best programming languages with the long option selected, and we are not continuing the previous chat. That really does not matter right now. But we have a very well formatted and very well presented response here. So yes, well, this is an UI improvement technically, but we were not handling the format that we were receiving properly. So it would be somewhat akin to like receiving a JSON and just dumping it for the user to just like, you know, just check out the fields you like, right? It's like, that's not really the best experience. Otherwise, we are also updating the description. And what I would recommend that you also have some kind of README, possibly for yourself, but for others, especially if you make it public, then people know what they are supposed to be doing. And ideally, you want to also keep up with the versions. Now, I did that automatically in this project because my auto committer not only automatically made commit messages and pushed the repo, but we also automatically updated the version. So, and I will be updating it instead of having 172 patches, which is gonna be 1.2.1, the release version. Also, I decided to disable continue previous chat by default, although I think it's a totally good feature, and you probably would like it if you keep using this software, and I would almost certainly prefer it. But for a first-time user, it might be a little bit more confusing. So in this case, I'm not exactly sure which should be the right option, but it certainly should be an option, right? By the way, releasing it is pretty damn easy. We just need to run build. We're kind of circling back to actually releasing it. And we are getting a size warning for the chat, but it should be fine, right? There's just an automatic warning. And definitely not an error. So it's being built, Chrome MV3. And this is what you would just drag into your browser, and you can use it like that. But in order to upload it to Chrome Web Store, you would need to compress it. And we can just add it to Chrome Web Store. Of course, the zip as a new item. And this is the store listing of it that we are just editing. And if you want to have relevant information about your project, then it probably would make the most sense that you use some kind of copilot to write your descriptions, because it knows about your project. If you just ask a generic request from some chat on the internet, or like, oh, give me some kind of a description for some kind of an AI chat or search thingy, that's not going to be as relevant. And you would want to also prominently feature the actual features that possibly most people would care about. Of course, you might not know, and in that case, possibly the best solution is just to look at what the other guys are doing and what is working for them. Now, we needed to make an update here because the description can only be 128 characters long. And we are storing the store description as a TXT here. You absolutely can just have it on the store, but suppose for some reason you want to store that information, and especially if you want to possibly upload it to multiple storefronts, like as a Firefox extension as well, it would make sense to just reuse the same thing. So over here we have the short description of free AI assistant that enhances search results, provides insights, and helps with writing. So if we just dump in the description, it should be fine. Category. And when it comes to categories, you should be picking the same category as your competitors are using, pretty much. So in our case, that is tools, and the language is English. Store icon ideally probably should be your logo. So we are getting some good value from this 128 PNG. And asset-wise, what I do see is that those who are very popular have a YouTube video and also 5 screenshots. Essentially, these are just ways, or probably better even said, opportunities for you to win over the user. But you need to have at least 1 screenshot. And by the way, this process can be somewhat involved, so it might make sense to save the draft and come back to it later. Which we will do right now. But when it comes to additional fields, you might want to set a site that you might reuse. Of course, the best use case for this is like if you set a site that actually just promotes your other stuff. My site personally is a little sparse. I will work on it more, but this is also just an opportunity for yourself to market, essentially. And this would be the key thing. This is why the extension is really worth it for most. Because they just make a free extension and then they promote their website. They just funnel people to their website. Because, yeah, the extension might make money, but you're getting attention for free. But we also have to deal with the privacy tab. Okay, sure. So we have the store listing. We still yet to add our marketing, essentially. But we still have to deal with privacy. And If you're just lazy, you can just ask AI to give you some answers here. There is a chance that they're gonna look at your stuff and realize that maybe you asked for too many permissions. At least this tends to happen to me, that maybe I asked for a permission that I'm not really using, but I thought I might use earlier. It's just not a big deal, but they're gonna reject your stuff and you're gonna remove the permission later. The only other concern would be that if you actually add an extension or a feature that they don't want on their store at all. So, for example, I had a feature to download thumbnails, right? This seems pretty innocent, yet they didn't like that because they own YouTube and downloading thumbnails is against the toss. Even though this was not an extension that was just aiming for YouTube, although that is the biggest site, I suppose. And by the way, AI did make one error that it said that we are storing locally, which was inaccurate because we're also syncing. And again, this is not a big deal, but you would absolutely get rejected for it, and you have to correct it later. And of course, we are not using remote code. Data usage is irrelevant. And privacy policy. If you just want to play it easy, then you can just literally make an HTML and host it on GitHub pages. And then you can just post this, and they're going to be happy with this. Like, okay, there you go. Now, this is totally fine if you have the same policy for all your projects, I suppose. But otherwise, you might need to create a unique one for each. But even that wouldn't be too troublesome. So, for example, when it comes to marketing images, I guess we can go with something like this. So here, you can go for multiple strategies. And here the strategy that I'm going for, and you can possibly say that this is lower effort, but also it's also more relevant, is that we're actually showing what we have. Because what you might see with many extensions that they just make a bunch of promises. So they just have like a screen and like they're like big promises, maybe like an explosion or a rocket, and like yeah, there's that, and their stuff sucks. So we're showing that we have search here with well, that kind of works in multiple contexts, and we're showing the pop-up. We are showing the page pop-up too, and we're showing this chat. So after seeing these images, ideally a prospective user kind of knows what the extension is. The only thing that we don't have at this point is a promo video, but I would actually somewhat recommend that you might not make a promo video for the very, very, very first release, because your extension might not be even out, or you may have to make a few tweaks. So my point is, get it released and available, and then most likely makes sense to make a YouTube video about it. And we still couldn't submit because we need to, I do not sell, yeah, we don't sell the stuff, and that should do it. Yeah. And then we can finally submit for review. Let's go. On the Chrome Web Store, there's nothing else to do but wait, and we can check our GitHub too. And yeah, it just looks decent, assuming we want to make it public. Which is certainly could be your choice, but I might argue that in the realm of extensions, it might make more of a sense to even make them open source, just completely free. And that is mainly because others can already kind of download your kind of source code and try to make a replica, I suppose. Just make sure that you're not showing, nor have you ever shown, anything that is sensitive. So, for example, if at any part of the development process I hard-coded an API key, then I would very least need to invalidate that, right? But we went for a different approach, which was that if we had to rerun the dev build, then we had to re-add the API key. Which certainly won't be the case for the users, because they will only need to add their API key once, and it will be persisted forever. So that's it. Made with love by the SamAI team, which is me, myself, and this guy.